Hello, I am Nilay Rathod and I am going to present an article by Ganesh Devy on the translation and literary history and Indian view. So let's start with the abstract. As Hillis Miller says that translation is the wandering existence of a text in a perpetual exile, and he connects this with Christian mythology of fall, exile, and wandering. He further states that Western metaphysics translation is an exile, a fall from origin, and mythical exile is a metaphorical translation, a post-Babel crisis. In the end, page number 8, you can find that in the student's note, post-Babel crisis, the biblical story of Tower of Bible. This mythology is according to this mythology, this story, this is the story of Noah who committed a sin after the great flood because they were not able to create a society befitting God's will, and instead they built a tower to reach heaven and challenge His authority, means God. But God destroyed the tower and scattered human to different part of the world and made them speak different languages. So this this action of God, the scattering of human and making them speak different languages, suggests that humans that were one at the time, they were able to speak one language and understand each other, but now they cannot understand each other. So thus we needed the translation so we can understand each other. Translation are not accorded the same status as original work, and many of the critics believe that Western literary criticism provides the guilt of translation for the coming into after being original. So why there is a guilt of translation? Because this is not original work; it is coming after the translation. The strong sense of individuality given to Western individuals through systematic philosophy and logic of social history makes them view translation as a intrusion or intruder of the order. This intrusion is desirable to the extent that it helps define one's own identity. Further, the philosophy of individualism and metaphysics of guilt renders European literary historiography incapable of grasping the origins of literary traditions. Let's go to role of translation. Here, the translation of Bible. This is a historical fact that the translation of Bible made a very significant part in the history of translation. It was authorized translation of the Bible, and it was also literary expression of Protestant Christianity. The recovery of original spirit of Christianity was thus sought by Protestant England through an act of translation. Later, he gives the example of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales that Chaucer was translating the style of Boccaccio into English when he created Canterbury Tales, and Dryden and Pope, when they wanted to create a sense of recovery, they used the tool of translation. And this similar attempt were made in the other European languages such as German and French. During the last two centuries, the role of translation in communicating literary movement across linguistic border has become very important. Indian English literature too has gathered many conventional writings from the Indological activity of translation during the late 18th and 19th century. Since translation are perceived as unoriginal, not much thought has been devoted to the aesthetics of translation. Issues relating to form and meaning to have not been settled in relation to translation. No critics has taken any well defined position about the exact placement in translation to literary history. Here we can find a threefold classification of translation. Roman Jacobson, in his essay on linguistics of translation, proposed the threefold classification of translation. First one, those from one verbal order to another verbal order within the same language system. Second, those from one language system to another language system. And third, those from verbal order to another system of science. And he considered that those he considered theoretically as complete semantic equivalence as the final objective act of translation. And he asserted that poetry is untranslatable, and he further goes into maintaining the statement that a creative translation, only creative translation is possible. In order to explain linguistic change, historical linguist employs the concept of semantic differentiation as well as the phonetic guides. If a synonymy within one language is near impossibility, it is not when we consider two related languages together. And he further goes into explaining the structural linguistics and how it is connected to the significance that translation is giving its significance with the culture of language, science systems, and many. And this part will be explained by Emisha. Thank you.
So first, before we go to the article, I want to clear with this how structural linguistic comes as a term that in structuralism in linguistics, any one of several schools of 20th century linguistics committed to the structuralist principle that a language is a self-contained relational structure, the elements of which derive their existence and their value from their distribution and opposition in text or discourse. So now we can get the clear idea that structural linguistic, a system of interconnected elements. Uh, Language is a system of science and arbitrarily developed. Structural linguistic considers as a system of science. So we know that how science signifier is connected to understand the various interconnected elements of the linguistic. Language is an open system. It keeps admitting new signs as well as new significance in its fold. So here the argument is that this theory naturally looks askance at translation, which is an attempt to rescue or abstract significance from one system of science and to wed it with another such system. And we know that how old languages like Latin, Greek, and from there so many words into recent, not that much old languages are made up with that science. Further, Ganesh Devy has put the question that do such systems become a single open and extended system? If translation is defined as some kind of communication of significance, and if we accept the structuralist principle that communication becomes possible because of the nature of science and their entire system, it follows that translation is a merger of science systems. When a person is a translator is doing translation, so first they have to go for the amalgamation of the entire sign or sign systems. Such a merger is possible because systems of sign are open and vulnerable. Further, he pointed out the term that is translating consciousness. At the page number of 9, the multilingual electric Hindu spirit, econsist, that's meaning established in belief in the soul's perpetual transition from form to form, may find it difficult to describe to the Western metaphysics of translation. Here in the article, we can see that he put the question that how metaphysics of Western metaphysics and Indian metaphysics are looking at the translation. The Indian consciousness, on the other hand, and in the crude manner of differentiating itself or translating consciousness. Also, the extent to which bilingual literary production has been accepted in India as a normal literary behavior, and the historical length of the existence of such practice are indicative of India's translating consciousness. So, by this note, we can get to know that how he has marked up the explanation of translating consciousness. In most third world countries where a dominating colonial language has acquired a privileged place, such communities do exist. In India, several languages are simultaneously used by language communities, as this language formed a continuous spectrum of signs and significance. That we know that after the World War One and World War Two, there were the colonization on the countries, that is third world war countries, and still the language of that powerful countries are on the rules. In India, several languages are simultaneously used by language communities that we have seen. Then further, here Ganesh Devi has put the argument of two critics, that is Noam Chomsky and Sasorian linguistic materialism. And in that, in Chomsky's linguistic, the concept of semantic universals. So, semantic universals meaning that the semantic which is connected with the meaning of words and sentences plays an important role. However, his level of abstractions marks the farthest limits to which the monolingual Sasorian linguistic materialism can be stretched. Further, there is another linguist, that is J.C. Catford, who has thrown the light upon the his argument in the linguistic theory of translation. There he is dealing with the idea that translation is an operation performed on languages, a process of substituting a text in a one language for a text in another. Clearly, then, any theory of translation must draw upon a theory of language, a general linguistic theory. During the 19th century, Europe had distributed various fields of humanistic knowledge into a threefold hierarchy: comparative studies for Europe, Orientalism for the Orient, and anthropology for the rest of the world. As Orientalism is carry artifacts or traits considered characteristic of Asia. Comparative literature implies that between two related languages there are areas of significance that are shared, just as there may be areas of significance that can never be shared. So here he is doubting by the both the side when he is go to the comparative literature. Translation can be seen as an attempt to bring a given language system in its entirety as close as possible to the areas of significance that it shares with another given language or languages. As the it is this argument is based on the semantic of universal level. Literary translation Literary translation is not just a replication of a text in another verbal system of sign. It is a replication of an order by subsystem of signs within a given language is in another corresponding order subsystem of sign within a related language. So here, Ganesh Devi is trying to say that when translator are doing translation, it is not only the copying thing or imitating from the one text to another text, but they have to focus on the subsystems of science and its meaning. Translation can be seen as an attempt to bring a given language system. Yes, so now we are focusing on the problems in translation study. The relationship between origins and sequentiality. Uh, how Very much like those in literary history, there are the problems of relationship between origins and sequentiality that end as in translation study. So in literary history, the problem of origin has not been tackled satisfactorily. So he is telling that this origin of translation study is not still satisfactorily done. Origin has not been tackled satisfactorily. The question of origins of literary traditions will have to be viewed differently by literary communities with translating consciousness. And there are critics like Jaydev Hemachandra, Michael Madhusudan Datta, and H.N. Apte, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Uh, by these critics, he is arguing that the fact that Indian literary communities do passes this translating consciousness can be brought home effectively by reminding ourselves that the very foundation of modern Indian literatures was laid through acts of translation. In the conclusion, let us allude that to Indian metaphysics is in conclusion, when the soul passes from one body to another, it does not lose any of its essential significance. Indian philosophies of the relationship between form and essence, structure and significance are guided by this metaphysics. So, at the introduction part, he is dealing with the Western metaphysics, and by the end of the article, he is dealing with the Western Indian metaphysics. So he is telling that how the process of translation, that one text to another text, and he is comparing to the soul. Indian literary theory does not lay undue emphasis on originality. If originality were made a criterion of literary excellence, a majority of Indian classics would fail the test. The true taste in the writer's capacity to transform, to translate, to restate, and revitalize the original. And in that sense, Indian literary traditions are essentially traditions of translation. So, in the end of the article, he is more focuses on the Indian metaphysics towards the translation and literary history and linguistic part. Thank you.